The first of the vessels arrived over the tundra sea at dawn, gleaming like a fallen star suspended beneath the paling horizon. It drifted across the cold firmament with neither sound nor wake, as though it were a thought too heavy to settle. The remote settlements along the scattered northern coastline watched the object glide in silence above the frozen waters, its hull reflecting the amber glow of a sun reluctant to rise. Those who saw it directly described it later as something that refused to be perfectly understood by the eye, as though its angles rearranged in the periphery of one's gaze, yet it possessed an unmistakable intention. It was searching. On the morning of its arrival, the world did not yet suspect that humanity had passed irreversibly into a new era. A few radar stations, positioned across the arc of the Northern Territories, tracked the object weekly until their instruments flickered and died one by one, as though an unseen hand had swept across the globe with quiet impatience. Airports closed their airspace preemptively. Governments issued temporary alerts while scrambling for information that did not exist. Civilian communication channels flooded with speculative explanations, each more frantic than the last, but all were united by a single, pulsing fear. This was not human craft. For the first several hours, the vessel did nothing but drift along the edge of the world. That inaction frightened authorities most of all. It suggested a patience alien to human behavior, an onlooker surveying a landscape before deciding where to set foot. Humanity had no choice but to wait together, sharing an unspoken dread that an old chapter of their species had just closed without permission. In a modest research outpost on the western cliffs facing the tundra sea, a team of atmospheric scientists had stopped everything they were doing the moment the vessel appeared. They were not soldiers, leaders, or specialists trained in extraterrestrial affairs. They were ordinary researchers whose concerns usually revolved around humidity arcs and wind currents. Yet when the strange object hovered within sight, they felt history tightening around them like a drawn breath. Among them was a woman named Surin Adalwin, whose field notebooks were filled with diagrams of pressure systems and sketches of cirrus clouds curling like faint brush strokes. She had risen early that morning, long before the vessel appeared, intending only to recalibrate the outpost's wind measurement tower. Instead, she found herself staring through the frost-veiled window at the shifting geometry of a machine the world had never imagined, her fingers trembling slightly as she pushed her glasses higher on her nose. She had never been a person who frightened easily. Her colleagues often teased that she treated powerful storms with the same mild interest as one might show a new bird species. Yet the vessel stirred something deeper than fear and ache, like the ground shifting under her sense of belonging. She did not know why. Perhaps humanity, despite all its curiosity, was not entirely ready to be seen by whatever intelligence guided the object. Her supervisor, an older researcher named Branton Kester, stood beside her, rubbing a shaking hand through his graying beard. "Surin," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might draw the vessel's attention, "tell me you're seeing this." "I am," she said. "I wish I understood it. Understanding may not be the priority," he muttered. "Surviving it might be." The outpost gathered in the observation room, 9 researchers pressed against the glass, their faces pale with the reflection of the celestial machine lingering above the horizon. Outside, the tundra sea moved sluggishly beneath the early light, ice slabs drifting like slow tectonic plates. A few seabirds circled in confused patterns, disoriented by the silent intruder gliding across the morning sky. The vessel paused. There was no better word for the shift in its motion. It simply stopped traveling forward, as though it had reached an invisible boundary. For a heartbeat, it hovered in place, and then its underside brightened with a pale, iridescent glow that shimmered like light refracted through deep water. Surin felt her breath catch, unsure whether she stood on the cusp of revelation or catastrophe. Without warning, a pulse of luminescence rippled outward from the vessel, expanding like a translucent sphere that swept across the sky and the frozen sea. It passed through the research outpost in utter silence. Lights flickered, screens dimmed, and several instruments sparked. The team ducked instinctively, though the pulse did not seem to cause physical impact. Yet when Surin looked again, her stomach twisted. The ice across the sea was cracking, not breaking apart violently, but splitting in precise geometric patterns that made no natural sense, as though unseen lines had been drawn across the world and the ice merely obeyed. "What is it doing?" whispered another researcher, a young analyst named Rylus Emmett, his voice straining with disbelief. Branton shook his head slowly. "It's mapping." Surin's throat tightened. "Mapping what?" "Us," he said, "or our planet, or both." Before anyone could respond, the vessel turned. It shifted direction not with the movement of engines or propulsion, but with an almost biological grace, as if it were following a scent carried on the wind. It glided inland, its path veering toward the heartland. The research team watched it disappear over the distant mountains, their sense of safety dissolving with the last glimmer of its reflective hull. Moments later, the outpost's communication system crackled alive with overlapping emergency broadcasts from the Northern Command Center. The vessel was now moving toward populated regions. All personnel were ordered to evacuate the outpost and retreat to the nearest reinforced shelter facilities. Surin turned to her supervisor. "We need to leave immediately." Branton nodded. "Pack only what you need. The transport will take us inland." But the evacuation would not be simple. The roads were narrow, carved through unpredictable terrain, and the outpost lay hours from the nearest fortified town. The team scrambled through the corridors, gathering essential equipment and emergency supplies, while alarms echoed like mechanical heartbeats through the facility. Outside, snow began to fall in erratic patterns, clumps of crystalline shards that descended in spirals, as though influenced by atmospheric disruptions from the vessel's earlier pulse. By the time the team filed into the rugged transport vehicle and began their descent away from the cliffs, the peculiar snowfall thickened enough to obscure the sky. The convoy of 3 research transports crawled along the frozen road, tires crunching over ice and gravel. The landscape stretched ahead in muted white layers, but an unnatural glow lingered behind them where the vessel had passed, as though the air itself remembered its presence. Surin watched through the rear window, unable to shake the feeling that something had changed inside her the moment the pulse touched the outpost. It was as though she could still sense faint vibrations from the vessel, like distant echoes brushing the back of her mind. She dismissed the thought. Stress made the mind do strange things. The convoy had traveled for barely an hour when the first tremor hit. It rippled through the earth with the force of a distant impact. Snow tumbled off hillsides. The transports shook violently, skidding across the icy path as the drivers fought to maintain control. Surin braced herself against her seat as the vehicle lurched, the metal frame groaning under the sudden movement. "What was that?" Rylus shouted from the seat beside her. "It did not come from the ground," Branton said from the front. His voice was grim. "That felt like something struck the atmosphere." A second tremor followed, this one accompanied by a faint, resonant hum that reverberated through the air like the aftershock of a distant storm. The convoy slowed to a halt. Through the swirling snowfall, Surin glimpsed a streak of light across the sky, something descending rapidly, burning not with fire, but with pale, shifting colors. "Another vessel," Rylus breathed, but the object plummeting toward the horizon looked different. It shuddered violently, trailing fragments of iridescent material that disintegrated into sparks as they fell. The object slammed into the earth beyond the ridgeline, casting a plume of multi-hued energy into the air. Moments later, a plume of snow and debris lifted skyward. The tremor that followed nearly sent the vehicles sliding off the road entirely. Branton cursed under his breath. That was a crash. For several seconds, the team sat quietly in shock, listening to the fading echoes of the impact. Finally, Branton turned to the others. We need to decide. Do we continue toward the town or investigate the crash site? Investigate, Rylus blurted. That thing could be dangerous. Everything about today is dangerous. We are scientists, Branton said. We were the first to witness the arrival. We might be the closest team to understand what just happened. Surin felt conflict tightening her chest. The town was still several hours away, and every tremor suggested that more anomalies could sweep through the region. Yet the crashed object might offer information that humanity desperately needed. She looked out at the sky. The original vessel was gone from sight, but its presence lingered like a phantom imprint across the clouds. If we reach the town, she said slowly, we will only wait for news like everyone else. But if this crash was one of theirs, and it fell, it might mean they are not invincible, or it might mean some of them are in trouble. Either way, we need to know. Branton nodded. Then we go investigate. The convoy turned from the main path, traveling toward the distant plume of energy rising like a faint beacon. The road was treacherous, but the team pressed on, driven by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and responsibility. They descended into a valley carved by ancient glaciers, where jagged stones pierced through the snow like the bones of old mountains. The air grew warmer as they approached the impact site, carrying a metallic tang that strung their tongues. The crashed object lay in the center of a shallow crater, its hull fractured and steaming. Unlike the earlier vessel that traversed the sky with graceful geometry, this one resembled a fragmented prism, its surface composed of intertwining crystalline layers that pulsed faintly with fading iridescence. Surin stepped carefully from the vehicle, her boots sinking into the softened snow around the crater. The heat radiating from the crash site melted the surrounding ice, exposing patches of dark earth beneath. "Stay behind me," Branton said, though his voice betrayed the same uncertainty gripping the rest of the team. They approached slowly, surveying the broken form of the extraterrestrial craft. Shattered segments of its hull jutted outward like broken facets of a gemstone, each reflecting distorted glimpses of the snowy landscape. The vessel let out faint, intermittent pulses of light that traveled across its surface in delicate patterns that almost resembled language. Surin felt the pulse resonate faintly in her chest, stirring the strange sensation she had felt since the first vessel swept across the outpost. She knelt near the edge of a fractured section, studying the glowing lines that illuminated its interior. "It's wounded," she whispered, unsure why the word felt appropriate. "Machines don't get wounded," Rylus said nervously. "They break." "This is not a machine," Surin said, "or at least not just one." Before Rylus could respond, a sound emerged from within the vessel, a high, wavering tone that carried both pain and intention. A section of the hull shifted inward, peeling back like the opening of a protective shell. The team stumbled backward, startled, as a figure emerged from the vessel. It was tall, slender, and composed of the same crystalline material as the craft, its form shimmering with fractured colors. Yet it moved with unmistakable effort, its steps uneven, its posture unsteady. It was injured. A sharp crack ran along one side of its body, where light flickered weakly through a wound like a split in living crystal. Surin stared at the being, her fear competing with a powerful sense of empathy. Whatever this creature was, it had survived a crash severe enough to nearly shatter its vessel. Branton raised a hand slowly, signaling the team to stay still. "Do not make sudden movements," he murmured. The crystalline being lifted its head, observing them through facets of translucent material that shifted like refracted starlight. Its expression, if it could be called, that carried an emotion Surin recognized instantly: desperation. The being extended one arm, its fingers composed of articulated crystalline joints. It traced a trembling line through the air, leaving behind a faint trail of light that formed a symbol. Surin did not understand its meaning, but she felt something stir within her again, the strange resonance she had been trying to ignore. The being collapsed to one knee, its body dimming. Surin took a step forward instinctively. "It's dying," she said. "We have to help it." Rylus grabbed her arm. "Help it? It's an alien being. We don't know what it wants or what it can do. It needs assistance," Surin said firmly, "and we are the only ones here." Branton hesitated for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. "We help it, carefully." With cautious steps, they approached the being. Surin knelt beside it, feeling the faint warmth radiating from its fractured body. The being turned its head toward her, its light flickering. It reached out and touched her hand not forcefully, but gently, as though seeking reassurance. A sudden surge of sensation coursed through Surin's mind, not images or words, but impressions, vastness, fear, pursuit, a plea. She gasped softly, pulling her hand back, but the faint thread of connection lingered. "It's communicating," she whispered. Not with language, with feeling. Branton knelt beside her. "What does it want?" Surin shook her head. It's afraid of something." The being lifted its gaze to the sky, though snowfall obscured the horizon. Then it traced another symbol in the air. This one flickered rapidly, as if charged with urgency. Surin recognized the impression, this time danger approaching. She stood quickly. "Something's coming." "From where?" Rylus asked. A distant hum echoed through the valley, low and steady, not the gentle hum of atmospheric wind, but something mechanical, something searching. The team turned toward the western ridge, where a dark shape emerged through the snowfall. It was another vessel, but unlike the crashed prism-shaped craft, this one was constructed of sharp, angular plates of dark metal. It moved with predatory certainty, cutting through the air without emitting light. Surin felt a cold weight settle in her chest. That one isn't here to help. The crystalline being struggled to rise, its body trembling. Surin instinctively moved to support it. Branton motioned to the rest of the team. "We need to retreat to the vehicles. Now, if that ship is hostile." The dark vessel descended with alarming speed, emitting a piercing beam of red-violet light that scanned the crater like a searching eye. When it locked onto the crashed craft, it released a shrill, metallic tone that vibrated through the valley. Surin felt the crystalline being tense. It grasped her arm tightly, its fragile fingers pressing urgently. "We have to go," she said, pulling it with her. The team sprinted back toward the transports, the being limping beside Surin. The hostile vessel unleashed a barrage of energy beams toward the crash site, shattering the remaining hull fragments in explosive bursts of light. The snow around the crater vaporized instantly, creating clouds of steam that obscured visibility. One of the blasts struck close enough to the team that the shockwave sent them tumbling across the ground. Surin hit the snow hard, scraping her palms. She scrambled to her feet, breath trembling, and dragged the crystalline being up as well. The air filled with the violent hum of the attackers' weaponry. Branton shouted for everyone to get inside the transports. The crystalline being stumbled, weakened further by the destruction of its craft. Surin refused to abandon it. She practically carried the being toward the nearest vehicle, her muscles burning with effort. The team piled inside, slamming the doors shut as the hostile vessel strafed the valley with relentless beams. "Go," Branton shouted at the driver. The transport roared to life, spinning its tires through the snow before launching forward. The other two vehicles followed closely, weaving through the valley's jagged terrain in a desperate escape. The hostile vessel pursued them, its beams slicing into the ground around the convoy. The crystalline being lay across the seats, its body dimming rapidly. Surin knelt beside it, gripping its hand. "Stay with us," she whispered. The being responded weakly, its light fluttering. She felt faint impressions pressed into her mind again: gratitude, fear, and something else: trust. The convoy raced through the valley, the hostile vessel closing in. Branton turned toward Surin. "Whatever that being is," he said, "it just made humanity part of something far larger than we understand." Surin looked down at the injured alien resting against her. She already knew he was right. Because in the faint connection between her mind and the crystalline beings, she sensed a truth that chilled her more deeply than the northern wind ever could. The first vessel that arrived this morning had not been exploring. It had been hunting, and it was not alone. The hostile vessel was only the beginning. And whatever conflict had brought these beings to Earth had now made humanity a participant, whether they wished it or not. The transports barreled through the valley, while the hostile vessel tore the air apart behind them, its predatory beams flashing across the snow in jagged streaks of red-violet. Surin kept one arm braced around the crystalline being's shoulders to keep it from falling as the vehicle jolted violently over uneven ground. Each impact sent a dull tremor through the being's fractured body, and its shimmering light flickered dangerously, as though its life were held together only by threads of dimming color. Outside, the mountains loomed like dark sentinels shrouded in restless snowfall. The sky thundered with distant rumbles that did not belong to any earthly storm. The driver swerved around an outcrop moments before a searing beam carved a smoking trench through the ground where they had been. The blast shockwave rattled the transport so violently that Surin and the others nearly slammed against the ceiling despite their harnesses. Branton leaned forward from the passenger seat, shouting to be heard. "We cannot outrun it forever. We need to lose it in the ridge." "I know," the driver yelled. "But the ridge is a labyrinth. If the snow thickens any more, a blast struck the ground directly in front of them, exploding in a burst of heat and light. The driver yanked the steering handles hard, sending the transport skidding sideways before it regained traction. Snow erupted around them. The other two transports followed closely, barely avoiding the debris. "It's targeting the injured one," Ryla said breathlessly from beside Surin. "It must be, otherwise why focus so much fire on us?" "Maybe it wants all of us," Branton replied grimly. "Or maybe it wants to erase the evidence that something went wrong with their arrival." Surin looked down at the being lying weakly against her. Its fingers tightened faintly around hers, sending a fleeting pulse of emotion that struck her with sudden clarity. Fear, yes, but buried beneath it something sharper. Urgency, warning. The being understood the vessel pursuing them. It understood what would happen if the convoy failed to escape. The transport jolted again as the driver forced the vehicle into the winding narrow paths that cut through the ridge paths carved long ago by glacial erosion and widened only slightly by human machinery. The towering stone walls closed around them, shielding them from direct line-of-sight attacks, but trapping them in a twisting maze. The driver killed the headlights. "If it cannot see us, it might pass overhead. Everyone quiet." Surin pressed a hand over the crystalline being's chest, feeling the rapid and erratic vibrations beneath her palm. Its body glowed too brightly for concealment. She reached instinctively toward the being's consciousness, unsure if the strange connection would work again. A faint pulse responded: confusion, weariness, and then a sensation like a dimming flame. She whispered to it, "Please, can you hide your light?" The being's colors shifted, weakening, folding inward. The radiance dimmed until only faint, ember-like glimmers remained, barely visible beneath its translucent form. Rylus exhaled shakily. "How did you do that?" I asked, Surin said simply. The transport coasted deeper into the ridge, engines humming lightly. Above them, the hostile vessels streaked across the sky, sweeping the landscape with searching beams. The beams passed over the ridge's mouth, but did not pierce the stone labyrinth within. For several harrowing minutes, the convoy crawled along the twisting path, not daring to accelerate or illuminate the terrain. The driver guided the vehicle purely by memory of the road's general shape and the occasional glint of ambient light reflecting off the stone. Every crunch of snow beneath the wheels felt deafening. Every breath felt like a beacon. At last, the sounds above softened. The hostile vessel's engines faded into the distance. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only when the driver finally allowed the engines to hum louder did voices return in trembling whispers. "Did we lose it?" Rylus asked. "For now," Branton said heavily, "but it will be back, and next time it may be smarter." The driver turned the transport sharply around a bend where the ridge widened enough to allow the three vehicles to regroup. Snow continued to fall in wide spirals, muffling everything in a thick, pale haze. When the convoy halted temporarily, Branton signaled for a quick assessment. "Everyone check injuries, check supplies. We will continue moving soon, but I need to know if anything critical was lost during the chase." Surin focused on the crystalline being. Its body lay unnaturally still, its light dimmed to a faint glow at the core. Small fractures spidered through its limbs and torso, each pulsing weakly like veins struggling to circulate energy. "We need to stabilize it," she said. Rylus frowned. "With what? We do not know its biology or if it even has biology." "It is alive," Surin insisted softly. "That is enough." Branton crouched beside her, examining the being with careful eyes. "If it can communicate with you, perhaps it can guide you. Try again." Surin hesitated. The earlier connection had been brief, confusing, and overwhelming, but she nodded. She placed both hands gently on the being's chest. Its crystalline surface felt warm but uneven, as though its internal structure was shifting in weak, irregular motions. She closed her eyes not because it helped physically, but because she felt that focusing inward required shutting out the chaotic world around her. A faint vibration traveled up her arms. A thread of intention reached toward her. She followed it. For a moment, she felt suspended in a space that was neither hers nor the being's. A realm of impressions instead of images, sensations instead of thoughts. The being conveyed glimpses of structure, not visual diagrams, but sensations of balance and harmony within its form. She sensed what the broken fractures felt like from the inside, a series of disrupted flows, like fractures in living currents. An ache, a dimming, pain that was more like unraveling. "It is losing coherence," she murmured aloud. "It needs alignment." "Alignment," Rylus echoed. Like its body needs to be reconnected somehow?" "Yes." Surin opened her eyes. "Its energy flows along crystalline channels. If we brace the fractures and allow it to rest, it may stabilize on its own." Branton nodded. "We can attempt that." The team gathered what supplies they had: thermal blankets, flexible splints, adhesive materials, and several compact heaters that emitted gentle, steady warmth. They handled the being with meticulous care, placing supports along its cracked limbs and torso. The heaters were arranged at a careful distance to provide warmth without risk of melting or damaging its unknown structure. As they worked, the being's light flickered faintly as though acknowledging the effort. Surin felt another soft pulse at the edges of her mind: gratitude. Something else, too: hope. She smiled weakly. "You are welcome," she whispered. Branton rose slowly. "We cannot stay here long. Once the being can be moved without risk of further harm, we must keep going." "If the hostile vessel circles back, it will," Surin said. She didn't know how she knew. She simply felt the certainty through the faint, lingering connection. "It is hunting the survivor. It will not stop." "Then neither can we," Branton replied. After an hour of careful stabilization, the being's light grew marginally stronger, still faint, but steadier, as though the internal fractures were no longer actively failing. The team carefully transferred the being back into the transport, cushioning it with additional supports. Once everyone was secure, the convoy resumed its journey through the ridge. As the vehicles emerged onto a wider path, the mountains parted to reveal a deep basin stretching ahead, an enormous depression carved into the earth, bordered by forest on one side and rising cliffs on the other. The snowfall had lessened, allowing a clearer view of the basin's expanse. The drivers hesitated. "This area is exposed," one of them said over the comm line. "If the hostile vessel returns, it will spot us immediately." "We will cross quickly," Branton answered. "It is the most direct route to the nearest fortified settlement." Surin glanced out at the open terrain uneasily, but she knew Branton was right. Staying in the ridge offered temporary concealment, but navigating its treacherous paths would slow them too much. And night was approaching. The convoy accelerated across the basin. The wind carried an eerie stillness, as though the land held its breath in the wake of the cosmic conflict unfolding above it. Halfway across, Surin felt the crystalline being stir. It lifted its head slightly, its facets reflecting the dim light. She leaned closer. "Are you awake?" The being did not respond verbally, but a pulse of emotion reached her alertness, tension, dread. It raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the sky behind them. Surin turned. A dark shape emerged over the ridge line. "It's back," she shouted. The hostile vessel descended with furious urgency, its beams cutting across the basin toward the convoy. The drivers immediately accelerated, pushing their transports to their limits. The vehicles bounced wildly across frozen earth as beams traced deadly paths around them. One beam grazed the rear of the last transport, tearing a molten scar into its side and blowing out its rear tire. The vehicle veered violently, nearly tipping. The driver regained control only by sheer instinct. Still, they were falling behind. "We cannot keep this up," Rylus cried. "It is too fast." The hostile vessel swooped lower, preparing another devastating strike. Then the crystalline being sat upright suddenly, every facet of its body glowing brighter. Surin felt a surge of emotion radiate from it: defiance, desperation, resolve. Before she could stop it, the being pressed both hands against the window, its light intensifying until it filled the interior of the transport with blinding radiance. "Wait, no, you cannot." Surin reached for it, but a wave of energy burst outward from the being's body, passing through the window like light through clear water. The wave expanded across the basin in a rippling arc, striking the hostile vessel. For the first time, the dark ship faltered. Its beams sputtered. Its hull flickered. The vessel jerked sideways, spiraling erratically through the air before stabilizing. It had not been destroyed, but it had been disrupted, stunned, momentarily blinded. The convoy accelerated across the final stretch of the basin, racing toward the forest edge. Surin collapsed beside the being as its light dimmed drastically, its body trembling from the immense effort. "That was too much," she whispered. "You should not have done that." The being's fading pulse reached her. A single impression, necessary. The convoy vanished into the sheltering darkness of the forest just as the hostile vessel regained control. Only when thick branches obscured the sky did the vehicles slow to a cautious crawl. The forest canopy offered concealment, but the night ahead threatened unknown dangers. The team gathered their breath, shaken to their cores. Branton exhaled shakily. "We survived, but only barely." Surin looked at the crystalline being resting weakly against her. She brushed a hand over its dim surface. "This is only the beginning," she murmured. She did not speak the rest aloud. Humanity had been dragged into a war between forces of unfathomable power, and the enemy knew exactly where to look next. The forest took them in like a dark sea swallowing a fleet of damaged ships. Branches clawed at the transports, scraping metallic groans into the night as the convoy pressed deeper under the shrouded canopy. The hostile vessel's distant hum faded behind them, though no one allowed themselves the comfort of believing they were safe. Surin sat with the crystalline being cradled partially against her, its fragile form dim and barely responsive after the massive burst of energy it had expelled. Every time she touched its chest or arms to steady it, she felt faint tremors through its structure, tremors that reminded her of a wounded animal struggling to stay conscious. She kept her voice low as she murmured to it, "You cannot do something like that again. You will break yourself apart." No reply came in words nor impressions. Only a faint pulse like a faraway echo answered her. The forest road was a narrow cut through tangled undergrowth, illuminated only sporadically by the dim headlights of the transport. Snow still fell, but beneath the thick canopy, the flakes descended in slow spirals like drifting feathers. Occasionally, they passed patches of fog that hung between the trees like pale curtains. The deeper they traveled, the warmer the air felt, warmer and stranger. Rylus leaned forward from the opposite seat, peering uneasily out the window. "Something's off," he muttered. "This forest shouldn't feel like this. Not in this region, not in this season." Branton glanced back at him. Atmospheric anomalies from the alien craft might have altered microclimates already. If their vessels can distort energy fields, they can distort local temperatures. It's not just temperature, Rylus insisted. The air feels thick. Surin felt it too. Every breath carried a subtle vibration, not physical, not audible, but perceptible, as though the air around them had memory, as though the forest itself was listening. The crystalline being stirred. Surin looked down. Its dim light flickered once, as if reacting to the forest's strange atmosphere. She swallowed tightly. Branton, she said quietly, I think there may be more going on here than we understand. You think the hostile vessel changed the forest? Rylus asked. No, Surin said. I think the forest is responding on its own. The idea would have sounded absurd any other day. Tonight, it felt like a calm statement of fact. After half an hour of crawling deeper under the pressing weight of branches, the convoy halted where a massive fallen tree blocked the road ahead. The drivers killed the engines. Silence descended heavy, total. Surin felt her pulse quicken. Even the wind had stopped moving. We moved the tree, Branton said. Quietly, we cannot be delayed too long. The team emerged from the transports cautiously, breath misting before their faces. Flashlights were kept off. The moonlight filtering through the canopy provided just enough to see by, painting the fallen tree in faint silver hues. It was enormous, easily 3 meters thick. Sliding it aside would take all their strength and time they didn't have. Before the team could begin clearing debris, the crystalline being stepped from the transport. It moved slowly, with unnatural stiffness, but under its own strength. Surin instinctively moved to catch it, but it raised a trembling hand to signal her back. Its dim light cast soft glows across the snow, illuminating the forest in scattered reflections. You should rest, Surin whispered. The being ignored her, walking toward the fallen tree. When it placed its hand on the dead bark, its fractured body brightened slightly. The forest reacted. Surin felt it immediately, an invisible stirring, a shift beneath the ground, like the land exhaled. A low vibration thrummed through the roots beneath their feet, and the fallen tree shuddered. Snow cascaded off its surface. Slowly, impossibly, the massive tree rolled aside, lifted by unseen force, guided by interwoven roots that moved like living serpents. Gasps erupted from the team. What was that? Rylus whispered. How did the forest move itself? Branton watched in stunned silence. It seems the being interacts with the natural environment, he said at last. Or perhaps this place is sensitive to its presence. The tree settled gently off the road, leaving a clear path. The crystalline being swayed, nearly collapsing. Surin rushed to stabilize it. Enough, she said firmly. You cannot keep giving away what little strength you have left. The being's light flickered. A single impression passed through her mind, a soft, weary acknowledgement. She guided it carefully back into the transport. As the convoy moved forward again, Branton tapped the driver's shoulder. Increase speed. I fear the forest's reaction will not go unnoticed by our pursuers. The driver accelerated. The road twisted deeper into dense terrain until the GPS units lost accuracy entirely. The maps showed only a large, undefined region of wilderness, one seldom traveled, barely studied, forgotten by most. Hours passed. The snowfall slowed. Distant night birds called eerily from the branches above, their voices distorted by the strange air. Finally, the convoy reached a narrowing path where the forest opened slightly ahead. A pale glow emanated beyond the trees, steady, soft, unnatural. Do you see that? Rylus whispered. Lights. Not human lights, Surin murmured. She felt the crystalline being stir again, as though beckoned. Branton hesitated. Proceed cautiously. The transports rolled forward until the forest cleared entirely, revealing a hidden basin illuminated by strange clusters of soft, floating luminescence. Pale globes of light drifted above the ground like slow-moving spores, pulsing with gentle radiance. They clung to nothing, anchored to nothing. They simply floated, suspended in the stillness. What are those? Rylus breathed. Bioluminescent organisms, Branton frowned. No species like this exists in our database. They are something else. As the convoy entered the basin, the luminous spores drifted closer, gathering around the transports. The crystalline being lifted its head as though recognizing them. When one of the floating lights drifted near the window, Surin felt a warm, soothing calm wash over her. She reached outward, the spore responded, bobbing softly toward her palm without touching the glass. "They're reacting to us," she murmured. "Or to it," Rylus said, nodding at the being. The spores brightened slightly, then dimmed, then brightened again in a slow sequence. A pattern communication. The drivers stopped the transports completely. Snow fell gently, swirling around the glowing spores like pale ash in a quiet celestial dance. The crystalline being stepped out once more, drawn toward the center of the basin. Surin followed, her boots crunching through the soft snow. The rest of the team fanned out cautiously. The spores gathered around the being. Their light synchronized with its dim pulses, glowing in harmony like 1,000 tiny lanterns responding to its heartbeat. The being raised one trembling arm. The spores responded by rising higher and shifting color, drifting upward in spirals of emerald and soft gold. Then an impression surged suddenly into Surin's mind, not from the being, but from the spores themselves. A sense of welcome, shelter. "Sanctuary," Surin exhaled. "They're offering us refuge," she said softly. "This place is alive in ways we don't understand." Branton scanned the basin warily. "If this place shields us, then we will stay the night. But we set watches. Something this strange may protect us, but it may also attract attention." The team set up a temporary camp within the basin. The transports formed a loose circle, with the crystalline being resting at the center. The spores hovered overhead, giving off warmth and light. The forest around the basin darkened, as though receding from the gentle radiance. Hours passed uneventfully, but the closer Surin sat to the crystalline being, the more she sensed the strain within its structure. Though its fractures had stopped worsening, it still teetered on the brink of collapse. "Why were you being hunted?" she whispered to it. "Why come to our world?" A faint pulse answered, fragmented, weak. She felt emotions like broken echoes, exile, flight, betrayal, desperation, and something larger, something planetary. Her breath caught. "You weren't invading," she murmured. "You were escaping." The being's pulse flickered in confirmation. She placed her hand gently against its chest, feeling soft warmth through its crystalline surface. "Then whoever is hunting you, they have already reached our world." The thought hollowed her from the inside. She did not sleep. Midnight dragged on in strange quiet. The spore's glow remained constant. The forest stood unnervingly still, almost reverent. Near dawn, Surin rose to stretch her legs. A mist had settled across the basin, thin enough to see through yet thick enough to distort outlines. She breathed slowly, trying to calm the unease gathering in her chest, an unease she could not explain. The crystalline being slept, its dim glow steady. She touched its arm lightly before walking toward the basin's edge. The mist swirled around her boots. Then something moved in the distance. Surin froze. A shape flickered between the trees, tall, angular, metallic. Her pulse stopped. The hostile vessel? No, this shape was humanoid. Standing, watching, a figure composed of dark plates, like a living machine of sharp geometry. It stepped forward once. The mist parted around its form. A hunter. Surin backed away slowly. The figure tilted its head, sensing movement. Its eyes glowed with red-violet light, the same light as the hostile vessel. It saw her. "Branton," she hissed. Before the team could respond, the hunter raised one arm and fired a searing beam toward her. The spores reacted instantly. A wall of concentrated light erupted around the basin's edge, absorbing the blast. The ground shook with the force. Surin collapsed backward as the hunter strode forward. "It found us," Rylus shouted. The spores brightened, forming a luminous barrier. The hunter attacked again, this time with a piercing shriek that sent vibrations through the air like the tearing of metal. The barrier held. For now, the crystalline being awakened with a violent tremor. Surin rushed to it. "We are under attack. You cannot fight." "You will die." The being struggled to stand, its fractures glowing with strain. She held it down. "No, not this time." Impressions surged into her mind, fear not for itself, but for them, for humanity, for the forest. "Run," the impression urged. "Run now." Branton shouted orders. The team scrambled into the transports. The spores shone brighter, desperately reinforcing the barrier. The hunter attacked with growing fury. The crystalline being reached weakly towards Surin, another impression forming. Together, she realized with sudden clarity that whatever war these beings fled, whatever enemy hunted them, humanity was not just collateral damage. Humanity was now a variable, one the hunters had not expected, one that mattered. She squeezed the being's hand. Then we'll run together. As the transports roared to life and broke from the basin's shelter, the barrier shattered behind them in a blinding explosion of light. The hunter advanced. The forest trembled awake, and humanity's role in an alien war had only just begun. The journey to the planet known to the cartographers as Verdant Expanse began with the uneasy thrum of the starship's engines straining against spacetime itself. Every human aboard knew that the path ahead would mark a hinge point in history, not only because of the destination's rumored mysteries, but because the expedition was the first in which humanity was no longer shielded by anonymity. The meeting with the mechanical intelligences at the shattered orbit had spread whispers across interstellar routes, and those whispers carried the weight of expectation. Some viewed humanity as a curiosity, others as an impending threat, and still others as a force that might disturb carefully balanced galactic structures. Now approaching a world said to host the oldest surviving biological civilization in known space, humanity stepped onto a stage from which it could not retreat. The ship descended through Verdant Expanse's atmosphere with a slow grace that belied the tension inside the cabin. The world unfolded beneath them as an endless mosaic of forest, mountain, and colossal inland seas that shimmered like molten precious metals. Towering trees stitched green continents together, and vast networks of bioluminescent vines traced luminous patterns across the terrain. Every surface seemed alive, pulsating with some hidden rhythm. It was a world that felt awake, as though it observed their descent with the patient curiosity of something that had existed long before human civilization ever learned to harness fire. The landing site chosen by the planet's inhabitants was a clearing bordered by gigantic stone monoliths, each etched with symbols that flickered in a pale blue glow. As the landing struts touched ground, a hush settled across the cabin. Even the ship systems felt muted, as though the world around them had wrapped everything in a cocoon of living stillness. When the ramp extended, a warm breeze swept into the ship, carrying the scent of resin, damp earth, and something sweetly metallic. The delegation that awaited them consisted of towering figures whose forms resembled arboreal creatures carved into graceful humanoid silhouettes. Their skin appeared to be a mixture of bark-like texture and living wood, with veins of soft luminescence running beneath the surface. Their eyes glowed with a gentle green radiance, as if reflecting centuries of observation and thought. Each movement they made was deliberate, a harmonic interplay between precision and fluidity that spoke of an advanced civilization rooted deeply in natural principles that the visitors could barely begin to understand. The leader stepped forward, its voice resonating not only through the air, but somehow through the bones of the listeners. It welcomed them in a language that the ship systems translated, though even the translation carried nuances that suggested layers of meaning beyond the words. The leader introduced itself as Keeper of Memory, an archivist of planetary history, and one who bore responsibility for guiding interactions with off-world species. Its gaze lingered on the humans longer than expected, as though measuring the contours of their potential. The initial exchanges were formal but warm, driven by curiosity on both sides. The inhabitants of Verdant Expanse, who referred to themselves with a name that translated loosely as Children of the Radiant Canopy, expressed genuine interest in humanity's rapid ascent. They spoke of observing humanity's signals from afar, noting how quickly humans had adapted to cosmic conditions that had taken other civilizations far longer to navigate. But their interest was not without caution. They made clear that the world they guarded held ancient knowledge and power that could reshape civilizations, and such knowledge was not freely given. The humans were led through forests where every leaf shimmered faintly with internal light, turning the pathways into corridors of emerald radiance. Creatures with iridescent wings drifted overhead, leaving spirals of glowing dust in their wake. Streams ran with crystalline clarity, their waters infused with microscopic organisms that emitted soft pulses of color. Everywhere, the symbiosis of life and energy suggested a world that had evolved along pathways fundamentally different from anything humanity had encountered. The first destination was a structure that appeared to be grown rather than built. It rose from the ground like a massive braided tree, its trunk hollowed into chambers that housed archives of knowledge. The interior walls were covered with swirling patterns that shifted in response to touch, revealing layers of recorded memories. Keeper of Memory explained that their species did not merely store data, they cultivated it, allowing knowledge to intertwine with the living world so that it remained dynamic and interconnected. This archive held secrets from before the time when many known civilizations had risen. One such secret was a cosmic anomaly known as the Unbounded Horizon, an immense region of space where the laws of physics seemed to bend beneath the influence of an unknown presence. The children of the radiant canopy had long studied traces of energy flowing from that region, seeking to understand its origins and purpose. Their findings were incomplete, but they believed that the anomaly was either an artifact from a civilization so ancient that its memory had faded from the universe, or a natural phenomenon shaped by forces beyond conventional comprehension. What unsettled the humans was not the anomaly itself, but the reason they were being told about it. Keeper of Memory revealed that humanity possessed a unique resonance with the energy signatures emanating from the unbounded horizon. This resonance was detected in the neural patterns of the human explorers, in the electromagnetic properties of their vessels, and even in the collective behavior of their species as observed through historical broadcasts. It was as though humanity had been shaped directly or indirectly to engage with something that awaited within the anomaly. This revelation sparked a wave of debate among the human delegation. Some argued that it was coincidence, a mere alignment of physical principles. Others questioned whether some ancient civilization might have influenced humanity's development long before recorded history. And then there were those who believed that humanity's relentless creativity and adaptability naturally positioned it to explore phenomena beyond the reach of more rigid societies. As discussions deepened, the children of the radiant canopy led them to another sacred site, a colossal rift carved into the earth, formed from a meteorite impact that predated their civilization. Within the rift, fragments of an unknown material pulsed with faint rhythmic vibrations. The locals referred to the meteorite as the first messenger, believing it to be the first touch from the unbounded horizon. Analyses showed that the fragments emitted energy patterns similar to those that had been traced to the anomaly. Yet the remarkable detail was that these patterns were subtly amplified when humans stood nearby. This discovery, demonstrated repeatedly through experimentation, stunned both sides. It was no longer theoretical speculation. The universe responded to humanity in ways unlike any other species. The question of why weighed heavily in the air, pressing upon every conversation and every quiet moment of reflection. Was humanity chosen, engineered, or simply aligned with something ancient and vast? And what responsibilities or dangers did such alignment bring? Humanity's growing realization of its unusual place in the cosmos formed a backdrop to interactions with the local culture. Despite the grandeur and mystery of verdant expanse, the inhabitants did not treat the humans with reverence or fear. Instead, They approached them as peers on the path of understanding. They shared their philosophy of growth, that knowledge should expand like a forest, branching outward, sustained by roots of tradition and nurtured by the light of curiosity. They encouraged the humans to think of themselves not as conquerors or wanderers, but as cultivators of possibility. At night, the sky above the planet transformed into a panoramic display of shifting nebulae and radiant streaks of light. Bioluminescent organisms rose from the forests like drifting lanterns, casting gentle illumination across the land. These nights became times for quiet conversation, reflection, and the forging of deeper bonds. Members of the delegation discussed what it meant for humanity to be recognized as something unique in the universe. They contemplated the responsibility of approaching the unbounded horizon, unsure whether it represented discovery, danger, destiny, or all these at once. One evening, the planet offered an unexpected spectacle. The ground beneath the clearing softened, and vines emerged to form a living structure that resembled a vast amphitheater. The children of the radiant canopy explained that this was a gathering place formed by the planet's native megaflora in response to significant moments. The gathering was intended to demonstrate the planet's living consciousness, which operated through ecological networks spanning the entire world. The amphitheater pulsed with rhythmic waves of light, synchronized with the heartbeat-like vibrations within the ground. The humans entered the amphitheater with reverent awe. As they stood in the center, Keeper of Memory approached and extended a hand toward the surrounding vines. A wave of luminescence swept across the structure, and the planet's consciousness manifested as a chorus of overlapping voices that blended into a harmonious resonance. The voices conveyed neither words nor images, but impressions, emotional landscapes that painted the passage of time, the growth of civilizations, and the deep-rooted connection between life and the cosmos. The planet presented humanity with a vision of the unbounded horizon, a vast expanse of swirling energies interlaced with geometric shapes that defied Euclidean interpretation. At the heart of the vision lay a colossal structure, its form shifting through impossible configurations. The humans sensed that the structure was either dormant or waiting, and that it somehow responded to their presence across the gulf of space. Yet beneath the wonder was a sense of warning. Great power slept within the horizon, and the universe was preparing for its awakening. When the vision faded, the amphitheater wilted gently back into the earth, leaving the humans shaken yet resolute. For the first time, they felt the magnitude of their journey not as an adventure or exploration, but as participation in a cosmic event with consequences stretching far beyond their species. The delegation convened with the children of the radiant canopy to discuss the path forward. The planetary inhabitants agreed to share knowledge that could help humanity approach the unbounded horizon, though they cautioned that preparation would require discipline, unity, and the ability to confront truths that might redefine their understanding of existence. Over the following days, the humans studied ancient records etched into living memory walls. They learned of civilizations consumed by their own discoveries, of others who flourished by embracing harmony with the cosmos, and of events that reshaped galaxies. The most haunting accounts described species that ventured too close to the unbounded horizon only to vanish. The children of the radiant canopy believed those civilizations were not destroyed, but transformed, their consciousness absorbed into something beyond comprehension. The humans faced an existential dilemma. Should they attempt to unravel the mystery that beckoned them, risking everything, or should they retreat from the edge, relinquishing the possibility of discovery that might forever alter their place in the universe? The delegation debated this question intensely, each member grappling with fears, ambitions, hopes, and uncertainties. What united them was the recognition that humanity had always been a species driven by the urge to understand, to reach beyond its grasp, and to confront the unknown with defiance and wonder. Even so, understanding the cosmic anomaly required more than intellectual resolve. The children of the radiant canopy insisted that humans must first undergo a process of resonance alignment. This would attune their neural and energetic patterns to the frequencies emitted by the anomaly, increasing their chances of surviving the encounter. The process took place at the foot of an ancient tree whose roots stretched kilometers deep and whose branches formed a canopy that glowed with shifting chromatic patterns. The tree, known as the Grand Harmonizer, was revered as a conduit between the planet and the fabric of space-time. The resonance alignment involved immersing oneself in a living network of vines that connected to the tree's root system. As each human stepped into the network, the vines wrapped around their limbs and torso, not constricting but supporting. Pulses of energy flowed through the contact points, synchronizing with their heartbeat and breathing. The initial sensation was disorienting, like floating between waking and dreaming. But gradually, participants began to perceive faint echoes of something vast and distant, an underlying hum that seemed to be the background note of the universe. Each human emerged from the process changed in subtle ways. Their senses felt heightened, their thoughts clearer, and their emotions more attuned to one another. More importantly, they could now feel, faintly yet undeniably, a pull toward the unbounded horizon, as though strands of energy connected them to something immense waiting beyond the boundaries of known space. When the resonance alignment concluded, Keeper of Memory delivered a final message. The children of the radiant canopy believed that the universe underwent cycles of transformation, and humanity had arrived at a moment when such a cycle was nearing its turning point. The unbounded horizon represented not merely a region of space, but a threshold. Passing through it could elevate a civilization or annihilate it. The choice of whether to approach the horizon lay entirely with humanity, but the consequences would ripple across the cosmos. The humans departed verdant expanse with both gratitude and apprehension. As their ship ascended through the atmosphere, they looked down upon the luminous forests and realized that their journey had become far more than an exploration mission. They carried knowledge that could alter the future of countless species, along with the weight of expectations from civilizations old and new. When the ship entered orbit and aligned its course toward the unbounded horizon, every human aboard felt the faint resonance humming through their bodies. The path ahead stretched into the unknown, but the determination that fueled humanity's ascent burned brighter than ever. They knew the risks, the mysteries, and the possibilities. And with courage forged across centuries of struggle, they prepared to confront whatever awaited at the cosmic threshold that called to them with ancient, irresistible force. The journey toward the unbounded horizon began with a quiet intensity that settled over the ship like an invisible fog. Systems hummed with a subtle resonance that had not existed before the alignment beneath the Grand Harmonizer. The crew felt its presence in the air, in the rhythm of their own breathing, even in the faint tingling at the edges of their awareness. It was as though a distant beacon pulsed across the gulf of space, calling to them with the same certainty that a lighthouse calls to a ship lost in storm-torn waters. Yet this call was not one of rescue. It was a summons. The ship accelerated along a trajectory that few civilizations dared plot. Stellar cartographers across the galaxy marked the region ahead as a place where navigation systems faltered, where energy fluctuations distorted sensor readings, and where travelers returned speaking in hushed tones about glimpses of structures impossible to describe. Some never returned at all. Humanity knew the risks, but there had always been something in the human spirit that leaned toward danger when it promised understanding. As they crossed the first boundary of distorted space, the stars outside the viewports warped subtly, elongating into streaks of shimmering light. It was not the familiar effect of faster-than-light travel, nor any known artifact of gravitational lensing. The distortions pulsed in time with the resonance in the crew's bodies, as if reacting to their presence. Where other species had perceived chaos in this region, humanity sensed an underlying pattern, faint yet unmistakable. It was like hearing a whisper beneath the roar of a storm. The ship's engines dimmed, not from failure, but from cautious design. Approaching the unbounded horizon required careful modulation, and even the most robust propulsion systems could be strained by the gravitational complexities surrounding the anomaly. The ship glided smoothly, guided not only by instruments, but by intuition. The resonance alignment had left the crew more attuned to subtle shifts in energy, allowing them to adjust course in ways no automated system could replicate. Inside the vessel, conversations turned philosophical. Crew members debated the origins of the anomaly, speculating whether it was the creation of an ancient civilization or a phenomenon older than the universe itself. Others wondered whether humanity's resonance was a coincidence or evidence of some hidden influence in their evolutionary past. These discussions revealed both hope and fear, for if something had shaped their species for this moment, then humanity's autonomy might not be as absolute as they had believed. As the ship drifted deeper into the region, the horizon of space ahead shifted from a dark expanse to a tapestry of vibrant colors. Waves of radiance rippled outward like the surface of a cosmic ocean, undulating in slow, mesmerizing patterns. Vast geometric shapes floated within the radiance, appearing solid one moment and dissolving the next. The shapes twisted through dimensions that defied comprehension, forming structures that seemed to be simultaneously near and impossibly distant. The crew stared in awe. The unbounded horizon lived up to its name. It was not a simple region of space, but a domain where the familiar rules bent around something unfathomable. For the first time, they felt the presence that the children of the radiant canopy had warned them about an immense awareness permeating the anomaly. It observed them not with hostility, but with a curious patience, like a mind that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless stars, and now turned its attention toward a species that had arrived too quickly and boldly for its expectations. The ship approached a structure that appeared to be a gateway. It was immense, spanning a distance larger than any megaproject built by known civilizations. Its frame consisted of interlocking segments that shifted like puzzle pieces, their edges glowing with vibrant hues that cascaded in intricate patterns. The structure radiated the same energy signature as the meteorite fragments on verdant expanse, confirming that they had reached the true source of the phenomenon. As they drew nearer, the gateway responded. Segments rotated, aligning in a configuration that opened a central aperture. A beam of luminous energy extended toward the ship, not as a weapon, but as an invitation. The resonance within the crew intensified, vibrating through their bones and minds. It felt as though the gateway recognized them, or perhaps recognized the energy growing within them since their alignment. The captain ordered the ship forward, though it was less an order and more a mutual decision that passed through the crew like a shared thought. They entered the aperture, and space around them transformed instantly. The familiar fabric of reality melted into a swirling vista of color, shape, and light. They were no longer in navigable space, but within a dimensional corridor built from energy patterns that twisted through spatial axes unfamiliar to the human mind. The ship's systems strained, overwhelmed by the influx of data. The vessel's hull creaked under the influence of forces that could not be classified as gravity or pressure. The crew felt waves of emotion that were not their own, sensations of immense age, curiosity, and something resembling anticipation. The anomaly was not merely a place, it was a mind, an entity woven from the very fabric of the corridor through which they traveled. The corridor expanded into an open space where the laws governing mass, time, and distance dissolved. Light moved in arcs that defied natural trajectories, passing through crystalline formations that pulsated with internal radiance. Some formations resembled colossal spires, others resembled floating latticework, and still others shifted into shapes that seemed to reflect the crew's thoughts. It was a realm where consciousness could influence structure, though not directly. Instead, it shaped the flow of energy in subtle ways. The crew experienced visions not in the form of memories or images, but in the form of impressions. They sensed entire epochs of cosmic history compressed into waves of feeling. They perceived the rise of civilizations long vanished, each leaving faint imprints on the anomaly's awareness. They perceived failures, triumphs, and epochs of transformation driven by encounters with the unbounded horizon. And above all, they perceived the presence that had been watching them since their arrival, a presence with depth greater than any intelligence known to exist. At the center of the vast space floated a structure composed of interwoven strands of energy. It resembled a massive sphere divided into thousands of shifting layers, each rotating independently. The movements formed complex patterns that hummed with a rhythm that resonated deeply with the human's alignment. It felt like a heart, though not in a biological sense. It was a core and anchor point that bound the anomaly to the rest of the universe. The ship approached cautiously. As they drew near, the structure emitted a pulse that enveloped the vessel in a cocoon of shimmering light. The resonance inside the crew intensified further, synchronizing with the rhythm of the core. Their thoughts grew clearer, almost unified, yet still distinctly individual. They sensed the presence, observing them more intently, probing the edges of their consciousness not to control, but to understand. The presence communicated through a form of contact that transcended language. It conveyed that the unbounded horizon was not an artifact built by a civilization in the traditional sense. Instead, it was a convergence point where the universe's earliest energies had condensed into a sentient form. Over billions of years, it had grown, adapted, and expanded, becoming a custodian of knowledge and transformation. Civilizations had discovered it at various points in history, some approaching with reverence, others with fear, and some with reckless ambition. The presence remembered them all. Humanity, however, was perceived as different, possessing both profound curiosity and the capacity for rapid evolution. Humans resonated with frequencies that mirrored the core's own. The presence sensed in humanity a potential that could either uplift or unravel, depending on how they chose to engage. The alignment performed on verdant expanse had been a preparation, attuning humanity to survive the encounter. But survival was only the beginning. The presence revealed that the anomaly was on the cusp of shifting into a new phase of existence. Cycles of cosmic transformation were not metaphorical. They were real phenomena driven by the evolution of vast energetic forces. When the shift occurred, knowledge from countless epochs would either be released into the universe or sealed away permanently. The presence sought a species capable of guiding the transition. Many had been tested across eons, but none had possessed the combination of adaptability, stubborn resilience, creativity, and resonance that humanity now demonstrated. To confirm humanity's suitability, the presence extended an invitation deeper into the core. The crew felt a pulling sensation, not physical but conceptual. Their minds brushed against layers of energy that vibrated with the memories of civilizations long gone. They perceived glimpses of wonders and horrors, galaxies reshaped by failed transitions, dimensions collapsing into singularities, and species ascending into forms beyond physical existence. They sensed that the role offered was not one of power, but of stewardship, requiring strength of will and clarity of purpose. The presence tested them in ways far more profound than simulations or intellectual challenges. It probed their fears, fear of annihilation, fear of insignificance, fear of losing autonomy. It probed their hopes, hope for unity, hope for knowledge, hope for a future beyond limitations. It probed their contradictions, their capacity for compassion and destruction, their ability to adapt and yet cling to identity. Through it all, humanity's defining trait emerged: the refusal to accept limits imposed by circumstance. Impressed, but still cautious, the presence presented them with a choice. They could retreat, carrying knowledge of the anomaly back to their people. The presence would remain dormant until another species arrived whose resonance matched the necessary patterns. Or humanity could accept the role of guiding the transition, stepping into a responsibility that would reshape not only their species, but the fabric of cosmic evolution. The crew debated collectively, yet the decision they reached felt inevitable. Humanity had always pushed into the unknown, not out of recklessness, but out of a drive to understand and shape its own destiny. They accepted. Upon acceptance, the core expanded its layers, revealing an interior that resembled a star forged from knowledge rather than plasma. The presence enveloped the ship, merging the crew's consciousness briefly into a collective state that transcended individuality. In that moment, they understood the true nature of the transition. It required aligning the anomaly's energies with the consciousness of a species capable of navigating the instability that would follow. The process would be dangerous, testing them to the limits of endurance, but if successful, it would unlock a new era of cosmic exploration and transformation. As the core prepared to initiate the alignment process, the ship vibrated with a deep resonance. Light surged through the dimensional space, rippling outward in spirals that reached into distant galaxies. The presence warned them that once the process began, they would be unable to turn back. The anomaly would observe them not with curiosity, but with scrutiny, evaluating their strength, unity, and capacity to uphold the responsibility they had chosen. The crew braced themselves as the first wave of transformation energy swept through the vessel. It pierced their minds, revealing not only their own histories, but the hidden pathways of the universe. They saw the interconnectedness of all life, the scaffolding of space-time, and the flow of energy that governed cosmic cycles. They understood that the transition ahead would require them to confront their deepest selves, to unify in purpose and resolve. With the core pulsating like the heartbeat of the cosmos, the humans stepped into their role at the threshold. The Unbounded Horizon watched them not as an observer, but as a partner. It awaited their next move, ready to open paths unseen by any civilization before them. The first wave of transformation energy struck with the force of a tidal surge, yet it did not batter the ship with physical impact. Instead, it flowed through the minds and bodies of the crew, pulling them into a shared perceptual field that felt both intimate and immense. Their senses dissolved into a luminous haze, and they found themselves suspended in a space where thought and reality blended seamlessly. They stood not on metal floors, but on a surface woven from light, its texture rippling beneath their feet like a living tapestry. The space around them expanded, revealing layers of shifting geometry that reflected their emotions in cascading patterns. The Unbounded Horizon was no longer merely a phenomenon. It had become a realm that reshaped itself in response to the consciousness entering it. The presence that guided the anomaly enveloped them fully now. Its voice was not a sound, but a convergence of impressions that carried meaning directly into their minds. It informed them that the transition required alignment not only with the anomaly's core, but with the fabric of reality itself. To steward the transformation, they needed to confront the limits of their perception, transcend the constraints of linear thinking, and embrace a perspective that spanned multiple dimensions of existence. It was not a challenge designed to break them. It was a test to ensure that they could shoulder the responsibility without faltering. Each human found themselves drifting away from the group, not physically but perceptually. The space around each crew member transformed into an environment drawn from their memories, fears, and aspirations. One found themselves standing in a desert of crimson sands beneath a sky filled with fractal constellations, where each grain of sand pulsed with echoes of decisions left unmade. Another found themselves within a forest of crystalline trees whose branches resonated with past triumphs and failures. Yet another drifted through an ocean of liquid light, carried by waves that mirrored the ebb and flow of their emotional life. These visions were neither illusions nor hallucinations. They were reflections of their inner selves projected onto the dimensional fabric of the anomaly. Guiding them through these landscapes was a subtle tether of resonance, connecting each human to the others. Though separated by their personal challenges, they could feel the presence of their companions, their shared determination, and the unspoken bond forged by countless trials. The resonance grew stronger as they embraced their introspections, revealing truths about themselves that they had long buried. Some confronted guilt over mistakes made in the pursuit of exploration. Others faced the fear that humanity might not be ready for the role offered to them. And others grappled with the weight of responsibility that extended beyond their own lives. As they explored their internal worlds, the dimensional corridor reacted to their thoughts, creating structures that served as guides or obstacles. One crew member encountered a towering spire of light that represented their ambition. Its radiant surface revealed moments of success that had driven them forward, but also moments when ambition had led them astray. They realized that true leadership required humility, not dominance, and this understanding reshaped the spire into a gentle beacon that lit their path. Another crew member faced a cavern carved from dark obsidian, its walls etched with reflections of their deepest anxieties. The reflections whispered doubts about their worthiness, questioning whether they had the strength to represent humanity in a role so monumental. But as the crew member pushed through the cavern, they discovered a path illuminated by soft glimmers of hope. Those glimmers represented the support of those they trusted, reminding them that no individual carried the burden alone. Throughout these trials, the presence observed quietly, neither intervening nor judging. It allowed humanity to confront the layers of identity that defined them, for the transition required clarity of purpose. Only by understanding themselves could they align with the anomaly's immense consciousness. The presence had witnessed civilizations falter under the weight of introspection, their resolve dissolving into chaos. But humanity did not turn away. They faced their fears, embraced their strengths, and acknowledged their uncertainties. Humanity's greatest asset had always been its capacity to evolve through struggle. When each crew member reached a place of equilibrium within their internal landscape, the dimensional environment shifted again. The separate visions dissolved, pulling them back into a shared space. The tapestry beneath their feet brightened, its patterns synchronizing with the rhythm of their collective resonance. The presence spoke once more, informing them that the first stage of alignment was complete. They had proven their willingness to confront themselves, but the next stage required confronting the anomaly directly. The space around them expanded into a vast chamber illuminated by spiraling torrents of cosmic energy. In the center hovered the core, a sphere of interwoven layers glowing with multidimensional brilliance. Each layer contained patterns resembling constellations, neural networks, and flowing rivers of thought. The core pulsed with a rhythm that matched their resonance, though its intensity was far greater. Approaching it required focus and unity. If their resonance faltered, the energy within the core could overwhelm them. The presence instructed them to form a collective intention, a unified purpose that would anchor them throughout the alignment. They stood side by side, reaching out with their minds, allowing their intentions to merge. Their shared purpose was simple yet profound, to guide the transformation not for power but for understanding, not for dominance but for the flourishing of life across the cosmos. As their intentions merged, the core responded, its layers unfolding to reveal a deeper interior more magnificent than anything they had seen. They stepped into the core, crossing a threshold where perception expanded beyond individual consciousness. Their thoughts intertwined without merging fully, forming a harmony of perspectives that retained individuality while creating something greater. It was a state of awareness no human had experienced, a collective mind that operated without coercion or loss of identity. Through this shared awareness, they perceived the anomaly's true structure, a lattice of energy spanning vast distances, linking galaxies through pathways of quantum entanglement. It was like witnessing the nervous system of the cosmos, with each node representing a moment of potential transformation. The presence explained that the anomaly's shift would reconfigure these pathways, altering the flow of energy throughout the universe. Such changes could bring renewal, collapse, or something entirely unprecedented. Humanity's role was to stabilize the shift, ensuring that the reconfiguration welcomed a new era of discovery rather than devastation. To achieve this, they needed to anchor themselves to the lattice. Each human reached out with their mind, touching strands of energy that radiated from the core. The moment they made contact, they felt the pulse of the universe, the birth of stars, the cycles of galaxies, and the reverberations of ancient civilizations. The sensation was overwhelming, yet their unified intention grounded them. The lattice responded by forming a series of corridors leading deeper into the anomaly's heart. They followed these corridors, their shared awareness guiding them through regions where energy folded in on itself and time flowed in spirals rather than linear streams. The corridors revealed echoes of past transitions, including ones that had failed. These echoes appeared as fractured realities, pockets of space frozen in patterns of collapse. In one such pocket, they saw an image of a civilization attempting to reshape the anomaly without unity. Their conflicting intentions caused the lattice to fracture, triggering a wave of instability that consumed their world. In another pocket, a species sought to harness the anomaly's power for conquest, only to be absorbed into it, losing their identity entirely. These warnings reinforced humanity's resolve. They understood that their strength lay not in power or technology, but in collaboration, adaptability, and determination. They reached the final layer of the anomaly, a region where the energy was so dense that it formed structures resembling stars condensed into crystalline clusters. These clusters represented the potential futures of the universe's endless variations, shaped by the decisions made during the transition. The presence informed them that they must choose a trajectory, a direction that would guide the transformation. They deliberated not through words, but through shared intuition. They sensed multiple futures, some radiant with promise, others dim with entropy, still others chaotic and unsteady. The trajectory they chose needed to honor the complexity of existence, allowing growth without imposing control. After what felt like both moments and centuries, they identified a path that balanced these elements, a trajectory of potential expansion where civilizations could flourish through exploration and cooperation, where knowledge flowed freely without being wielded as a weapon. The presence accepted their choice. The anomaly began its shift, the lattice vibrating with increasing intensity. Waves of energy surged outward, reshaping pathways across galaxies. Their shared consciousness held steady, anchoring the shift as the anomaly expanded its awareness into new dimensional spaces. Light burst from the core, illuminating every corner of the chamber, enveloping the humans in warmth that carried a sense of profound gratitude. The presence conveyed its final message. Humanity had proven itself worthy of guiding the transformation. The anomaly would no longer merely observe them. It would walk with them as a partner in the grand unfolding of cosmic evolution. The light faded, returning them to the ship's interior, but they were not the same. The resonance remained within them, not as a burden but as a bond. The ship's systems stabilized, calibrated now to energies that once would have been incomprehensible. Outside the viewport, The unbounded horizon no longer resembled an impenetrable region of chaotic space. It had become a radiant expanse of swirling colors and geometric beauty, its structure harmonized with the trajectory chosen by humanity. The ship slowly withdrew from the core, guided by currents of energy that carried them safely back toward familiar space. As they crossed the boundary of the anomaly, the stars returned to their natural forms, though they seemed brighter somehow, as if the universe itself acknowledged the transition. The crew exhaled collectively, their minds still connected by threads of resonance. They knew their world would never be the same, and neither would they. Their return journey was filled with quiet reflection. Some wondered how humanity would respond to what they had learned, how societies would adapt to the knowledge of their cosmic significance. Others felt a deep sense of responsibility, knowing that their experience granted humanity a role in shaping future cosmic transitions. All felt gratitude for the guidance of the children of the radiant canopy, whose wisdom had prepared them for the journey. When the ship approached the familiar beacon of human space, a sense of homecoming settled over the crew. They transmitted a message summarizing their journey, though words could not fully convey the immensity of their experience. They had stepped into the heart of a phenomenon older than galaxies, faced the truth of their own potential, and emerged as stewards of a new cosmic era. As the ship descended toward humanity's central world, crowds gathered, unaware of the magnitude of what had transpired. But the crew knew that the moment their feet touched the ground, the story would begin to unfold. Humanity would learn that it had been chosen not by fate or by external force, but by its own relentless spirit, its refusal to accept limitations, and its timeless yearning to discover what lay beyond. In the days ahead, humanity would rise to meet its new destiny. It would forge alliances with civilizations across the stars, nurturing collaboration and exploration. It would embrace the role of guide, ensuring that the universe's next chapter unfolded with wisdom and purpose. For the first time, humanity understood that it was not merely a traveler in the cosmos. It was a part of the cosmos itself, woven into the lattice of existence, ready to walk forward into an era of boundless possibility.